really good to see a very diverse crowd in here today, because usually as an MP I see, you know, a very kind of standard type of person in these rooms, so it's great to see everyone here. Is anyone here from Ealing or Acton? Hands up if you're from Ealing or Acton. Okay, so we have a good bunch of people. Well, look, I should take your details. I am your Member of Parliament. And so, I mean, it's still an honour and privilege to say that. I was elected in the May 2015 general election, so thank you to all the supportive people in this room. Every single vote counted. And we're talking about a very important subject today, which is the indigenous Somalis who are geographically in Ethiopia and having their human rights trampled on. And we need to keep these issues, we need to keep fighting. I mean, I remember, as many other people of my age, I'm 44 years old now, in 1984, the Bob Geldof and the Feed the World. Member of Parliament used me. We can do, I mean, I may be an opposition MP, but we can do certain things. It's an amazing honour and privilege to be a Member of Parliament. It's the only job in the world where you can, you know, eyeball the Prime Minister. With David Cameron, I did this a few times. I've done it once with Theresa May. Look at them in the eye and say, what are you doing about it? You know, Abdi from Acton does not like the policy. Sort it out. So, I mean, do use me as your resource, as your voice in Parliament. And also, you know, I'm always happy to come and speak to groups. So if there is a group of Somali women or just Somali people, they don't have to be women, let's not pigeonhole. I'm happy to come, and I do an assembly pretty much every Monday and Friday in Ealing and Acton. And we hear that kids are not politically engaged, but I find they're really intellectually curious. They want to know about how to make the world a better place. They ask really probing questions, more than the MPs who, you know, I won't say they're all asleep all the time, but I mean, you know, so I'm happy to come, and there will be the higher events in the award ceremony in December. Who will be coming to that in Greenford? Anyone coming to Greenford Town Hall? The Horn of Africa Youth Association, who I've been to for quite a few years now. I think it'll be my 4th one. So again, I mean, there are so many stereotypes in our media about Muslims, about Somali people or whatever, certainly about Asian people, I know there's plenty. So usually in the media, if you see a Muslim person, they're maybe got a 10-foot beard or they're veiled up or something, and we have examples of, you know, great examples of British Somalis in this country, people like Raghi Omar, people like...
Amir Khan, the best boxer of...
There you go, Amir Khan. Pockets do this. In athletics and in news broadcasting, so many good examples. So, okay, I think it works now. I was just filling in time.
Thank you very much, Dr.
I was filling in time as big one. So thank you. I'm honoured to be your servant. I'm your servant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. And can I now introduce Martin Schibye? Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Whose other friend was with him, John Pearson. And they both went to Ethiopia in 2011 to look into human rights violation. And they were put into the most notorious prison and were treated as a terrorist.
Yes.
And I think you look like terrorists. There was a gentleman with a cap today, and he went to have a cup of coffee with me, and somebody sitting there didn't like him. And he started you know, saying words which were not good enough. And he was from the security of the parliament. And he went out and asked him the name. I said, if you have the name, we will complain it today. So I think we face this sort of difficulty every day, everywhere. So we should carry on campaigning for the word which should be a better word, whether it is Ethiopia, Kashmir, Palestine, whatever, means Iraq. There is a friend from Iraq sitting here. Where is my friend Hashim? Are you here? He has booked Dr. Lupak a meeting for Iraq, human rights in Iraq on 30th of November. You are most welcome to come to it. So can I now ask Martin to show us his experiences in a film, is it?
It's
a brief film.
There will be some short clips.
Oh, you will speak?
I will speak, yeah.
So can I invite Martin to speak on his experiences in Ethiopia in 2011 and tell us his story. Mahdi.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. And as said, I spent 14 months in the jail in Ethiopia. I was convicted as a terrorist and spent the time as a prisoner for doing my job as a journalist, trying to cover the human rights situation in Ethiopia. And after 14 months, on the day of our release, when the loudspeaker calls our names and we are called to the gate, there is a bit of chaos and frenzy inside the prison, and there are many friends who wants to say goodbye. And I remember one of them, he wants to hug me before I leave the prison, but there are police officers standing in the way and hitting him with their batons, but he takes a lot of hitting on his forearms, and he managed to get to me in the chaos, and he hugs me and he shouts in my ear, "Please, please, Martin, tell the world what you have seen." And that promise to him, who woke up this morning on a concrete floor in the Kaliti prison, it has driven me and my colleague to write a book about our experiences. And it's also the reason I accept to speak about it, to keep that promise to a friend of mine who's still in jail, and many others are. So thank you for letting me keep a promise by presenting my story here. I will go quite quickly through it, but basically I've been working as a foreign correspondent for the last 12 years, covering wars and conflicts in Southeast Asia, in Africa. Always trying to use my feet more than Google, trying to give the voiceless a voice, trying to do the story that mainstream medias are not covering and not doing. And in 2011, me and my colleague, we started to investigate stories from refugees who had fled the Ogaden region. And we met many of them in Dadaab, a refugee camp in northeastern Kenya. And the stories from these refugees, they were really horrible. It was stories about mass gross human rights violations, stories about rape, testimonies about villages being burned, testimonies about pastoralists being forced away from their ancestral lands. And for both me and Johan, we had never heard about Ogaden before, and we thought that isn't Ethiopia a country at peace? And these stories affected us, and we couldn't really let them go, and we felt a need to really go to the crime scene and see what is Ogaden, what kind of place is it. And at the same time, in 2011, there was a Swedish-linked oil company, Lundin Petroleum, who were planning to explore oil in the Ogaden region. So suddenly we had really this Swedish angle to the problem, that we have an area, the Ogaden, from where a lot of people are fleeing with horrible stories, and we had the Swedish oil company going into this area to explore oil. And then, of course, as many times in journalism, there were two narratives. We had the oil company and the Ethiopian regime who said this is a peaceful area, oil exploration will lift everyone out of poverty. On the other hand, we had the testimonies from the refugees, and also the voices of rebel movements working for against the foreign oil companies and working for the status of the area to be decided, and who consider the Ethiopian presence as an occupation. And I mean, we could have settled there and done that kind of story on one hand. On the other hand, in the end, time will tell. But we felt that there are facts on the ground that needs to be checked, and that the role of journalism is really to find out who's lying, who's telling the truth. And I mean, the cash of journalism is facts, and to do that, we had to go in and we had to enter the Ogaden territory. It turned out to be very difficult, and when we talked to NGOs like the Red Cross or Doctors Without Borders, they had all been kicked out of the area. When we talked to embassy staff and diplomats, they were not allowed to travel into the area. When we talked to other journalists who had tried this story, they had been arrested and been kicked out. So we were left with kind of two choices to go into the area. We could have maybe asked the Ethiopian army to show us the area. They would have shown maybe a hospital and a school and something that promoted their interest. Or we were thinking of asking the rebel group, could you be our taxi? Could you take us to the oil fields? Could you show us, take us to the civilians? We can talk to them and assess by ourselves the humanitarian situation in the area. And of course, these are two very complex way of working. As a foreign correspondent, you always want to be free and make your own decisions, but in conflict zones, it's not rare to work embedded with one part of the conflict in order to do your story. So we decided to go in illegally into Ethiopia and into Ogaden from Somalia, and we did that the summer of 2011 and met up with the rebel group and started to walking towards the oil fields. As you can see, the Ogaden, it's not a Sahara-like desert. It's quite bushy and a lot more green and lush than you might imagine. The first thing that really struck us when we entered the Ogaden region was that the conflict level in this area was much, much higher than what we had anticipated. The rebels told us they had been involved in fighting the last days and the last weeks with Ethiopian army regiments. And we met civilians who were on their way to flee to the refugee camps in Daawo. We met people who had stories of torture and where they come to the Ethiopian army and been tortured by the army. We also passed huts where people until recently had been living and had forced to leave. So we really felt that we were onto something. There is really a story here in the sand to be told, and we were the first foreign journalists to do so. And the thing that if you go into this area as a Swedish oil company, you would need to work with the Ethiopian army for your protection. And we could hear that this army were committing a lot of crimes, and that puts you in a kind of a risky situation as a foreign company if you rely on an army that commits human rights violations for your security. But after 3 days and 3 nights, suddenly we hear a gunshot, and in our risk assessment plan, what we plan to do if we are attacked by the Ethiopian army is that me and Johan should stay, put our hands in the air and surrender, and the rebels will run away so that we will not be caught in the crossfire. So after 3 days and nights, we are being attacked by 300 Ethiopian soldiers. We are immediately shot. I'm shot through the shoulder. Johan is shot through his arm. And we are arrested by the Ethiopian army and the Leo police, as the group is called, that is arresting us. Of course, I mean, in a situation like this where the story went wrong and you find yourself shot, arrested by the Ethiopian army, the things that go through your head is how do you stay alive? How do you connect to these guys so that they don't shoot you? And the thing that comes up in my mind is we have to make them sure that we are worth more than a sack of potato. We have to find some kind of common ground and some common topic to talk about. And the thing that I come up with, let's talk about football. So I asked them, I mean, what team is your favorite team? Is it Arsenal or is it Barcelona? And the soldier looks at me and said, well, of course it's Barcelona. And I say, oh, I'm from Sweden. And the soldier goes, Sweden, you know Zlatan? And I say, yes, he's a brother from another mother. And then he says, yeah, you big nose too. And then feel some kind of connection with this Leo police. And as the hours go by, I get a feeling that these young men who are in the Leo police, they are also in a way victims of the conflict. And we interviewed many of them before we went in, and many had stories how they had been forced to join the Leo militia, or otherwise they would have to flee the region. And at that point we feel that we have the story from the rebels and from refugees, and now we also have the first-hand testimonies from the Leo militia. This might be a good story anyway, and soon they will kick us out. But what happens is where this story, which was supposed to be about oil, becomes a story about ink and press freedom. Because what happens is that Ethiopia chooses not to kick us out, as they have done with other journalists that are being caught in the region. Instead, they choose to fly down their regional vice president, Mr. Abdullahi Berar, who is on the left in this picture. And he presents us with a choice. Either you take part in a film that I will make, a mockumentary, where I will show what happened when you were arrested, or you will be shot and you will not leave this desert alive. And in the beginning we refuse to stand in front of his camera, because we say, if you want to charge us with anything, please take us to a court, give us a lawyer so we can sort this out. Let us contact our embassy, please give us medical care for our wounds, give us antibiotics. And we tell him that he's violating both Ethiopian and international law by keeping us incommunicado in the desert. His response to those demands is to arrange a mock execution, where me and Johan are separated, and I'm told to walk against the horizon. I'm then told to stop, and Abdullah he's put up a firing squad with soldiers who raises their Kalashnikovs, and I hear the safety catches flick. And he tells me that he will count to 3, and before 3 I have to confess that I'm supporting, that I'm a terrorist, and that I support the rebel group. I don't do that. I tell him that I'm a journalist, and my job is to write about the situation in the area, and I talk to all parts. I talk to the rebels, I talk to the government. He's not satisfied with this answer, so he says 3, and the soldiers fire, but they fire in the bush next to me, and I fell down in the sand, and when I realized that I'm alive, a film camera comes up and another interrogation takes part. And I mean, I survived that day, but I lost my freedom for the coming 438 days. And the following days, from morning to night, we are forced to take part in his film making, and forced to stand in front of the camera while he is fabricating evidence that will be used in court in Ethiopia to sentence us as terrorists, but also material that will be used as propaganda on the Ethiopian national television. And at that point, we feel that they can never let us see this and let us live. I mean, we will be shot after we have participated in this film. And I also think that even if we are released, who would believe me? Who would believe that the regional vice president would arrange, a mockumentary and a mock execution? It would be word against word. And these days in the desert are totally surreal. He takes 2 civilians who we have never seen before. He dresses them as rebels. He gives them guns and tells them, like, action, run. He takes out a dead body we don't recognize and tell us, this is your friend, this is what happens if you don't cooperate. And for 3 days he fabricates these kind of evidences. But the unique thing happens, and I think that is one of the great things with, it is a really great thing that one in this force responsible for this propaganda film, his name is Abdullah Hussein, he decides to become a whistleblower, and he decides to escape with the original material. And on the original film you can see that everything is fake and everything is a setup. And as you see this small actor here, he's acting a little too good, that you can see in the original films, for being someone who is arrested. So they were actors, and we had never met them. And I'm forever thankful for Abdullah Hussein to risking his life and becoming a whistleblower and leave Ethiopia with this material, so that we have really evidences that this is fabrication of evidence and that the mock execution really took place in the desert. And if there is someone who should be called a hero, it's Abdullah Hussein really in this story. We are then taken here. This is the Makalawi, the federal police station in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, and this is my first cell, and hopefully also my last cell. Of all these 14 months, the days that I spend in these cells in isolation is really the worst time, because you are so, I mean, not used to being alone, and I think it's one of the worst thing you can do to another human being, to put him in isolation in a cell. And even today I still remember the sounds from this place, because above these cells there were interrogation rooms, and I remember that in the beginning when I heard the sound of body against body or body against wall, I thought to myself that this is the police, practicing martial art or playing floorball, because those were the kind of references I had from growing up in Sweden. And then I recognized that there is a pattern to these voices. In the beginning the screams are very, very high, and towards the end the abused prisoner is always silent. And it takes many hours until I realize that this is the sound of torture, that the fear of being beaten is worse than the actual pain. And towards the end, there's just this sound of body against floor. And sitting in this cell, hearing this sound, thinking that it might be Johan, it might be me next, was a truly, horrifying experience. We were also, at this point, denied lawyers, and when the interrogations started, we saw it in the beginning as a chance to sort out the mistakes, to show them that, I mean, we are bona fide journalists. We are here and our purpose is journalism. But slowly we come to understand that maybe it's just because we are journalists that Ethiopia has chosen to use us as a brick. Maybe it's just because we are Swedish journalists that they want to state an example. And I mean, we should remember this is a time when the Arabic Spring is still on its very height. And of course, a country like Ethiopia, where the ruling party has 99.6% of the parliament, they would look with fear on such a democratic development and choose rather to act than being acted upon. So all the interrogations they never want to sort out anything, and there is no really professional interrogation. Everything is about confessing. Everything is about you're presented with a blank piece of paper, and then you are told to sign here and to confess. And this is also the story I hear from other inmates at this prison, that everything is about to get a forced confession. And after a couple of weeks in isolation, even me and Johan, finally we signed something in Amharic that we didn't understand, just to get to a court, or just to get further in the investigation in any way. And I just see it as a sign that if they treat two foreign journalists in this way, I mean, imagine how they would treat local journalists, or imagine what have happened to us if we had been Somalian, Ethiopian, or Ogadennian. Then we had probably been shot in the desert and been treated in a much harder way. After a couple of weeks in the Makalawi federal police station, we start to think of who are the other people at this police station at this time. And one of the women that we see on the courtyard when she has her time outside the cell, because you spend 23 hours and 50 minutes every day in your cell, and then you have 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the afternoon when you're allowed to go to the toilet. And one of the woman we see is this woman, and I remember looking at her and wondering what is her crime? What did she do? Why is she here? And at one point she nods at us, and then when it's our turn to go to the toilet, we find in the toilet a matchbox, and in that matchbox we find a letter, and I will read what she writes to us. And first, above the letter, it says that when you read this, please destroy the letter and flush it down. But until today I remembered it, and she writes, "Dear Martin and Johan, my name is Wariye Alemu. I worked as an editor at the newspaper Addis Press before this regime had me arrested. Before then, I was a columnist at a newspaper called Fifth, which means justice. I wrote many columns and articles which were critical of the government. That's why I'm here. If you're released before me, please tell the world that I'm not a terrorist, but a journalist working for the truth. I wish you luck, both of you." And I remember reading that letter, and at that point I got the feeling that we have ended up in something much bigger than just two Swedish journalists crossing a border. We have ended up in a major crackdown against free speech in Ethiopia. And we realized that in the cell left of us, in the cell right of us, and in the cell in front of us are young students, other journalists, local politicians, all accused of terrorism. So there has really been an all-out hunting season declared on journalists and on dissent on Ethiopia at this time, and we have become a part of that hunting season. And Wariye, she becomes our teacher, you can say, and this toilet becomes like our university. And she tells us who the other people are at this prison at the time. She tells us about Wubshe Taye, who is in the cell to our right. She tells us about Iskinder Nega, who is also arrested, and about all the other local journalists. But she also gives us something else, a feeling that even though you are jailed, even though you are chained, even though you are locked up and deprived of your physical freedom, there is one thing that they can't take from you, the very sacred and I mean the inner, very most important things. They can never take from you who you are. And we are journalists. Well, then every morning in this cell will just be another day at the office. So we will just have to get up, take a teaspoon of cement, and figure out how would I describe this cell in a future book? How would I describe this interrogation in a reportage? And suddenly the suffering had a meaning, and after that kind of the coin fell down in a way, and we found a strategy to deal with our time in prison. And for that I'm forever thankful to her and to the other local journalists who gave us this kind of message of staying strong and keep on reporting. So from that on, the time in prison and the coming year in prison became what made you get up in the morning was the dream of one day writing a book about your experience, or one day turning this experience into journalism. In the autumn, after 3 months of interrogations, we are taken with the local journalists to the Kalite Federal Prison, and this is the aerial footage of the prison. The word prison really leads the thoughts in a wrong way. It's more like a World War II detention camp in a way, with barbed wire and concrete, corrugated roof. At that point, there's about 7,000 prisoners at the Kalite prison, and we are taken into Zone 6 and Room 2. And in our zone, we are about 800. In our room, we are about 300 prisoners. And of course, when we are taken to this prison, you fear for your life, and you think that you will get beaten, and you have been, portrayed on the state propaganda as a terrorist, and you think that all people in this prison, they will hate you. But the opposite happens, and we are met with curiosity and hospitality, and we are invited into a prison family where it really doesn't matter what crimes we are suspected of. Now we are here together, and then prisoners shares the food that is there. And even though that this was a horrible time, that is an experience I wouldn't want to be without. That, man locked up doesn't become an animal. On the contrary, it's not survival of the fittest. It's the ability to cooperate and to work together in small groups that is the key to survival in such a situation. And the hospitality shown to us by the other prisoners, I will never forget that. We were given food, we were given blankets, and the first word that I learned in Amarinja, it's nubla, which means come and eat. And I hope that any Ethiopian imprisoned in our countries would be met with the same hospitality. I will show you a picture from inside our room. This is from inside the prison, and as you can see, it's 200-300% overcrowded, and half of the prisoners sleep directly on the concrete floor, and it's so packed that the associations you get in your head from seeing these kind of pictures is that it looks like on the slave ships, where people are packed like sardines, and there are so many people you don't even see the floor, and it's impossible to walk without stepping on someone. And of course, in such an environment, diseases spread very quickly. A lot of our fellow inmates died from simple curable diseases like ammonia, tuberculosis, spread very, very fast. About once a month, a prisoner left with his feet first. But as time went by in this prison, the worst thing was not really the sanitary conditions, because you couldn't learn to deal with them. It was the fear of speaking, and you could see that people who spoke politics were taken away and disappeared. You could see that people who objected, who protested, suddenly the next morning they were not there anymore. And in the beginning you kind of shook this thing off and thought to yourself that I will always speak truth to power. I will never self-censor myself. I'm a Swedish journalist. I will tell what's on my mind. But as week became month, you noticed how this kind of self-censorship got to you, and it got under your skin, and you could wake up on this concrete floor drenched in sweat thinking, did I say something bad about the government in my dream? Did I say something that could put me into more trouble? And you would look to your right and to your left and see everyone seems to be asleep, it seems to be okay. But this fear of speaking and this geography of fear was really the worst thing living in that prison. Being deprived of your freedom of speech became almost a physical feeling, and it led to that all your conversations, even in Swedish with Johan, were just about food or training or the weather or something that was safe. And this has also been the difficult thing, even after I was free, to kind of regain the freedom of speech, to understand that even if I criticize things here today, nobody will put me on a plane back to Addis Ababa. But it took time to realize that, and your mind is still playing tricks with you. So being in this prison, we really felt that in order to stay normal, we had to do something. We had to take the initiative in a way, and we asked people in Sweden to send letters to us and to send us books. And there was a huge response, and there were hundreds of books being sent to the prison, and hundreds of letters. And since this prison, it was not called a prison in the local language, it was called a rehabilitation center. So the purpose of it was to rehabilitate our thinking. And that meant that you had a censor in the prison responsible to only approve politically, morally boosting literature and letters. And this censor suddenly had a huge workload. And I remember he called me and Johan up. He was very angry because he had these hundreds of books and letters. And he said that, well, you have the right to receive letters, but I have a right to censor them, and I censored them all, so you will not read them. And of course that felt bad because we wanted to read the letters, but on the other hand, just seeing all of those letters handwritten from all over Sweden with messages to me and Johan, it was more important than food and water, really, because it made us feel that we are not forgotten, and that we are here for a good cause, and that we have turned, we have ended up in the front line in struggle that has turned global. So that's really my message to you, that, take your time and write to prisoners of conscience, write to jailed journalists. And you might think that, well, it won't set anyone free. No, probably not, but it will mean something more important than freedom. It will give the imprisoned journalists hope. And it will give them a feeling that they are not forgotten, because that is your worst fear, being locked up. It's also a prison where there are a lot of brave people, and the best book, it couldn't be written now, it might be written in the future. But just to give you an example of all the brave people in that prison, I remember in 2012, during Ramadan, suddenly there is an order from the prison administration that praying is forbidden. No one is allowed to pray. This is a time where many of the Muslim congregations in the country are demanding the right to choose their own leaders. They don't want the leaders appointed by the government. And there are huge demonstrations, and then we are arrested en masse, and every week there comes a busload with Muslim protesters. And then the prison decides to ban praying in the prison. And I remember that night how one young guy from Mali, and he knew the whole Quran by heart. I remember him standing up inside this room with 300 prisoners, and in the presence of armed guards, he started to sing, the Quran in a very, very bluesy voice. And then one by one the prisoners got down from their beds and they walked towards one part of the room, and they kneeled and they started to pray. And the guards in the beginning tried to stop them and tried to point at them with their Kalashnikovs and their weapons, but they defied their guards and they defied their fear, because the only thing they really feared was God. And I will never forget them, and I will never forget that night and what they did for all of us in that prison. And they really helped us all to keep our dignity, and they also paid a high price for doing so. But there are also so many brave people inside that prison, and so many brave friends that are still there. Just to say something short also about the trial. I'm a convicted terrorist, and that really shows you that this war on terror has turned into a war on journalism. It shows you the dangers of this terrorist legislation, the rubber paragraphs that countries like Ethiopia are using to criminalize dissent. Because it was very clear from the first day of our trial, this is a picture of us outside the High Court in Addis Ababa, that it was not me and Johan on trial. Ethiopia was putting journalism on trial. And they wanted to state an example and show other foreign journalists, don't come to Ethiopia and write about human rights. Don't get caught with your fingers in this jar. But maybe most importantly, they wanted to send the message of fear to the local journalists. Look what we can do to these two Swedish guys. Imagine what we could do to you. And to send this message of fear. And also to show the world that they could do this, that they could jail two foreign correspondents and get away with it. And I think that in hindsight, if you look at it, there are a lot of countries who looked at Ethiopia and was inspired and saw, well, you can cross this red line. I mean, this was quite historically the first time ever two foreign correspondents are being prosecuted and convicted as terrorists for doing their job, talking to all parts in a conflict. But after that, you have seen countries like Egypt, like Iran, like Turkey, using terrorist legislations against foreign correspondents. And I see this really as one of the greatest dangers to journalism ahead. I mean, if we are only allowed to talk to the government, if we are not allowed to talk to rebel groups or to terrorist labeled groups, what kind of image of the world will we present in our reportage? I mean, it will be a one-sided story. It will be, eventually the world will be, a silent place, and that is not really journalism. And we can also see how Ethiopia has succeeded in this sense, and that the image of Ethiopia is rather positive if you look at the news. It's about double-digit growth. It's about investment. It's not about human rights abuses, because the price of writing about human rights abuses is just a price too high to play. After 14 months in that prison, I think that Ethiopia felt that they had achieved what they wanted to achieve. They had sent this message of fear, and we were given the chance to ask for pardon or clemency and then be kicked out of the country and released. Of course, this was also a lot of diplomatic pressure, a lot of diplomatic work behind our release. But it's very clear to us during the process that Ethiopia is regarded by the Swedish government and by many governments in Europe as some kind of geopolitical diamond. And they also say to us, well, you could stay and appeal, but then you should know, quote, that then you will be sacrificed on the geopolitical altar, end quote, from a Swedish diplomat. So it was very clear to us that Swedish investments and the relationship to Ethiopia over-trumped matters like press freedom and the right for journalists to work. And of course, for the local journalists, for Skindinega, for example, he's sentenced to 18 years, he's still there. Ryota Lemo was sentenced to 12 years, and got it down to 5, and she was released the other year ago. But the situation now is far worse than when me and Johan left. There are twice as many journalists in jail today in Ethiopia than it were when we left. So the situation is really going in the wrong direction. And since October, there is also a state of emergency declared in Ethiopia. And according to Human Rights Watch, 600 civilian demonstrators has been shot dead. And this state of emergency has also had that effect that there are few, if any, news coming out of Ethiopia outside Addis Ababa. There is really a lack of information, a lack of credible information. And to sum up, I think that journalists has already paid and are paying a very high price to tell the world what is happening in Ethiopia, and it's now up to the international community to demand an impartial investigation into areas like Ogaden. The price for journalists to try and get in there is just too high, because you know you will get shot and you will be sentenced as a terrorist. And it's time for the international community to act and to demand Ethiopia to let in investigators to assess the human rights situation. And it might sound like a dark description and a kind of pessimistic future, but sometimes I think to myself that in that prison you could bribe a guard to get in drugs, you could bribe a guard to get in weapons, but there was one thing: how many beer or dollar you offered to pay, they wouldn't touch, and that was books, literature, and newspapers. And I think in the end that is something positive, that this, words on paper is what these kind of regimes are very most afraid of, and that there is really a power in the written and the spoken word that in the long run will overtrump weapons and repression. And the day that mine Johan's book is in prison library in that prison translated to Amharinia, then I'm finished with Ethiopia, and then this assignment is considered finished. Thank you so much for listening.
People like Martin are the people who are keeping us and humanity alive. I think it is very important, Martin, that your sacrifice for 14 months has raised the voices of the voiceless people of Ethiopia. Other organizations who have supported today's meeting, apart from Third World Solidarity, is Amnesty International. And I'm very pleased that although whenever we ask questions, and I've asked many times questions, Tishale and Trevor knows, from British Foreign Office and British Defence, who spend billions of pounds supporting Ethiopia. Whenever we ask them question, where is the human rights? And they say security has taken over the human rights issue today. So it is very important that people like yourself keep on raising these voices, and people like myself asking these questions, that we can continue with that. I think another point which you made very rightly is, we, all of you, live in a free country. We can do whatever we like to. Your duty is, like Mustafa and other friends who have gone to their local MP and asked them to come here. You should go back today and ask your MP why you were not there. And this is your right. And this is her or his duty to come and support you. So in this country, you can do that. And in Sweden, we can do the same. I think another point which you raised is prisoner of conscience. I think Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch are very important, although both organizations are banned in Ethiopia at the moment, and nobody can push the government to do it. Although we have spoken to the chairman of APPG on Ethiopia, who has a good link with the government of Ethiopia, Trevor, myself, and Tishale, and he has raised this. We met the minister here a few months back with our chairman, Dave Anderson, and he went and he raised these questions and pushed it, the government of Ethiopia, but they are not budging because they know that the British, Swedish, and all Western countries' support is with us until we can keep that security in control. And I think that is very important to continue. Another point, Amnesty International has a prisoner of conscience in their books. Let's write letter to those people who are prisoner of conscience. And it is very important, as Martin said, that people sitting in those prison of Ethiopia, when they receive a letter from United Kingdom or London, they are encouraged to continue their struggle. I have seen it. I have seen the prison, not in Ethiopia, but Pakistan, which is almost similar. When the dictator comes in any third world country, their attitude is same. I know that nobody has been flogged, they are being killed, and we will speak in a minute and you will be able to ask question, Martin. But in Pakistan, in 70s, late 70s and 80s, people were lashed and then put speaker in front of them, as this is in front of me, that people can listen their shout. And I think this is one of the cruel things happening in 20th century and continued in 21st century. You and I have to stand up in the Western world to raise the voices of those voiceless. And can I ask now, Patricia, would you like to say a few words before we open it floor? There are a couple of people I want to ask. Patricia works for Amnesty International, and she has helped us to continue this struggle. And I'm also thankful to all members of Costa Club who are here and who are not here as well. Patricia.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Martin, for your story. And I was curious to know if you had met Iskinder Nega, who is the Amnesty prisoner of conscience. Well, he's the example journalist, I suppose, representing many more that Amnesty has as a focus case. And groups do often ask, they write letters, and there are a lot of groups around the country. I think we have over 42 at the minute, local groups who do write letters. Some of them write letters every week. They write to the prisoner themselves, his partner or his wife, the government, the embassy here, and they don't get any replies. And I suppose the question is always, does it make any difference? We don't get any news, we don't get any replies, but that's really reassuring to know that at least you do know at least that somebody is writing. So that's great, and I won't say any more because I'm sure we've got lots of questions for Martin, but yes, I think do support was going to say, do support Amnesty, especially now we're coming up for the for Rights. Go to the website, you can find lots of details, and yeah, as far as you can, as much as you can, do send a letter of support or just a quick card at this time.
Thank you, Patricia. Trevor, would you like to say a few words, very briefly? Trevor has done a lot of human rights work in Kenya on refugees from Ethiopia.
The government of Ethiopia, between a quarter and a third of its GDP comes from foreign aid. And without foreign aid, the regime in Ethiopia would cease to exist. So, in my view, we should hold Western governments to account for supporting that regime. And I'd like to know Martin's comments on that hypothesis and what he would recommend that human rights activists do in the West regarding Western support for the Ethiopian government.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Would you like to respond now, or can I ask another journalist, American journalist to say a few words? And let me introduce you to. She was born in America, and at the age of 17, she went to Ethiopia and lived there for 1 year, not in prison, but I think as a free woman. She has been doing journalism, visiting Pakistan and many other third world countries, including Iraq, which is another a very difficult country at the moment. Can I invite Sandra Setterly to say a few words before we come back to you, Martin?
Yes, thank you very much. I was really impressed, Martin, with your comments on obviously your book and the suffering that you encountered when you were in Ethiopia. I was there, as Mushtaq mentioned, a very long time ago. Today we have the tragic situation of the Ogaden people, the Omara, and the Amharics too, who are involved in a conflict where the government has said during the state of emergency, they have stated there have been 11,000 people that have been imprisoned. We've moved beyond Haile Selassie. He was alive. I saw him on many occasions, quite close up when I lived there, to the Mengistu dictatorship and Zenawi, and now the present government. The situation is grim. It is not good. So many people are suffering. A few years ago, The Economist, amongst other publications, highlighted the great turnaround of the Ethiopian economy. But to what cost? Because there were the Chinese moving in and other peoples building dams and taking over the land that was agricultural by many of the peoples of Ethiopia, to the great suffering. It is really unfortunate that there's this seemingly media blackout, and even more tragic is that Western governments seem to be turning a blind eye to the plight of the very noble people of Ethiopia. I did travel around quite a bit when I was there, and I became politicized basically when I was in Ethiopia. I'd never seen abject poverty, though Haile Selassie did start a university and draw on the international community to come in and teach. I mean, there are some good things happening and then some very negative things happening. It breaks my heart that the country hasn't moved beyond its present state, and I worry for the global economy now, that from my country, though I live here, has elected someone who's not going to probably do any favors, as maybe Clinton wouldn't have either. But I really sincerely hope, I thank everyone here who is from Ethiopia. I'm humbled and grateful to have had the privilege of living there, and we can only hope that there might be some greater listening to the cry and the tragedy of Ethiopia for the rest of the world right now. I mean, I just say, hail Ethiopia. It's a magnificent country and it deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Thank you, Raji. The first question came from Trevor. What should we do, the human rights activists in this Western world? That was the question.
I mean, one really important thing that I feel that we all should do, both as politicians or investors or activists, is really to learn the names of the jailed. Because often when when even our own governments try to do something, we kind of criticize the human rights situation, and the response from the Ethiopian regime is, well, we have some problems and we are working with it and yada yada. I mean, you have to make it personal. It has to be, why is Eskindanega jailed? Why is Wubshetaya jailed? I mean, they have names and they have ages and they have histories and they have wives and kids and families. It has to be personal. Because when you ask a personal question, why is Eskindanega jailed? The answer cannot be just a general answer. It has to be a specific answer. And as long as the discussion is not specific about specific individuals, it's not really a discussion that's leading anywhere. And that is, I mean, if you look at the Ogaden scenario, even more important, because if you're jailed and you are taken to Kaliti or to one of the federal prisons, in a way you don't disappear, but there are so many people being jailed and abducted in the Ogaden area who disappears. So then it's even more important to ask names. Where are these people? Could you show us these people? That's one thing I think that the international community can do. And I'm a journalist. I'm not an activist. I'm not telling like don't invest or do this, and that's not my role. My role is to tell people what I saw and what people told me when I interview them. But I feel that also goes for, I mean, you have H&M and you have IKEA and you have Volvo, just to name a couple of big Swedish companies investing in Ethiopia. I have the same message for them. I mean, learn the names of the jailed and ask about the situation for press freedom, not only about the situation in the factories for trade unions and salaries, etc. Also try to influence the country on a bigger scale. And when it comes to Eskindanega, when me and Johan was jailed, he was still free. And he was so brave, so we actually did a statement where he criticized the arrest of me and Johan. And he said that this is abuse of the terrorist legislation. How can it be used against journalists? This is a mockery of justice. And that also led him, that he was arrested for criticizing the terrorist law. It was also one of the points that led to his arrest, defending me and Johan. But I'm not saying that, I mean, I went in there without a visa. I committed a crime, and I'm not angry at the Ethiopian army for shooting me even. I mean, if you work in a conflict area, that's a risk you take as a reporter. But they could have sentenced me for trespassing or for not being without a visa. They could have given me 3 years for that. It had been draconian, but still I wouldn't complain, and no one else had complained either. What makes me upset, and what I think is the real danger in this, is that I was prosecuted and convicted as a terrorist for doing my job. I mean, that is the real scandal, the core of this issue. But of course I committed a crime. I went there illegally, and that's what journalists do. That's how we roll in conflict zones, and I was prepared to take the consequences of that. But I don't accept being convicted as a terrorist. And in a way, it shows you what has happened with this war on terror, and many people warned about this development when these new laws came and said that these laws, they're rubber paragraphs, they can be used against journalists, against dissent. And I mean, keep in mind that the Ethiopian terror law, it's a word-by-word copy of the British terror law. It's exactly the same law. It's just used in a different political climate, in a different context. So these laws are dangerous, and I'm the first one to testify on how they can be used. And it's also sad because there is also, I mean, real problems with terrorism in the world, and I think that our law enforcing agencies should focus on real terrorists and not on journalists and political activists.
Thank you very much. What I will do is you can make note of the names who will ask questions. You can comment, you can ask questions, and I'm very pleased there are many ladies here who are mothers, sisters, and who know what difficulty they face when men are put into the prison. So first is your question, name, and then ask.
My name is Khaled, I'm from Oromo community. So if you have all these evidences, why don't you sue them internationally?
I mean, I write books instead. That's how I roll. I get sued, I don't sue. I also think
but
that
rather than telling them in a book, book is one thing. Yeah. And then you can sue them internationally. You're already out. What happened to you is if you say that it's not right, okay? So if you think that it's not right, if something happened to you, why don't you go and sue them internationally?
Let me respond to you, Khalid. This book is available around here. So later on, pick up this book and become a group of Ethiopian living in United Kingdom and sue your government on behalf of Martin. Why don't you do it? Yeah, please. Any other question or comment?
Yes, Martin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Your name, please.
My name is Wariye. I'm a journalist. I'm the representative of Somalia. As far as we know, Somalia had a country, and our country has been destroyed by the Western countries, including Britain, Italy, and Ethiopia. And we know the Western world, they call themselves democratic countries, but only these democratic values works in Western world. It doesn't work. They support, regime change, which was Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, was really wrong. The regime change of Ethiopia is inevitable. But the Western world, they always have supported by Ethiopia. So as a journalist, what is your government has done so far after you get released? And have you talked to the Prime Minister or the top officials of Sweden to stop supporting this regime? I know Ethiopia is one of the biggest recipients in Africa. I've heard of that after the Israel. So what have you done so far to stop, these money goes into the Ethiopian government and Ethiopian army? We know George Bush have been in favor to support in Ethiopia. And when the Islamic courts come up in Somalia, and we know the Islamic courts was a part of creating new environment, new hope to Somalia. And the George Bush have destroyed these hopes. And still we have a ravage in our country. There are 6 or 5,000 Ethiopians are currently terrorizing our people in Somalia. And Ethiopian as well. But the Western world, they're calling the word anybody who fighting for freedom, like, what can I say, Ogaden Liberation Army, have been named, labeled terrorists. And this, in fact, they're not terrorists, they're defending their people every single day. But the Western world, they see these guys are terrorists as they label to you a terrorist. So what can we do together today here? I mean, we have a prime minister, new prime minister. We have a prime minister, I believe, in Sweden. And how can we challenge, these Western world who giving arm and money to Ethiopia and terrorizing in every part in Africa? Not Ethiopia is terrorizing by Ogaden, Oromo, or Amhara. They're terrorizing the whole of Africa. I mean, there are millions of Somalians who are suffering in the name of Ethiopia. So what can we do now? How are we going to stop this terror? I mean, this terrorist state of Ethiopia?
If you want to comment before I comment, and then you can comment. I think I have suggested already. It is up to you, the people who live Western world. How many Ugandans live in here, Tishale, in United Kingdom? Do you know any number? Huh?
17,000.
And can you organize, Usman Yusuf, a demonstration at 10 Downing Street of Urgadian community and bring 2,000 people? And I can tell you, if you put a petition, next time there will be a question. Dr. Rupa Haq asked some of you to come to her and she will ask questions from the Prime Minister. Although it is the double standard, there are resolutions passed in 48, in 30s, which are not being implemented. But when it is passed on Iraq, it was implemented within weeks with force. So you and I and Martin has to raise these questions and expose the double standard of the Western world. Martin, let him respond.
Yeah, before Martin respond to you, if I respond to your comments, I mean, we wrote many letters.
We are not here to debate. We are here to help each other.
So the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, we wrote to Gordon Brown. We haven't written anything to Cameron because we never get any response, as he said. No response. No response. We tried to write letters to the Prime Minister, but he never get we never get response.
Have you read history? How ANC succeeded in South Africa? How long they had to struggle? How many people were sitting in front of South African embassy in Trafalgar Square? Did you ever do that? On hunger strike, there are now parliamentarians. What is his name? He has written a book as well. a man who was born in Ethiopia, Peter Hain. He has written a book on it. I sat with him in 1973 in front of South African embassy, and he was arrested. And do you know what was the charge put on him in 1973 in London? Bank robbery. So I know what happens when the regimes like to do it. We have just seen last week British government refusing to do a commission on their heavy-handedness with NUM, National Miners Worker. So we know that. But it is your and my duty. Have you become the member of Stop the War Coalition against war in Iraq? Are you member? Yeah. I am. So let's get involved. Martin, respond, please. I know it is your and my duty. Don't ask him. He is doing his duty. He has been in prison for 14 months, written a book, and speaks wherever you invite him. Go on.
No, it's a delicate topic, and I think in a world of real politics, I think one thing that we can do is make our government don't do any harm. I mean, there's for example, Abdullah Berar, the vice president of the region at the time, the mock executor, the evidence fabricator. I mean, there is so much evidence. There were so much evidences on him, also on other abuses against civilians in the Ogaden region. He was in London in 2013 in January, I think. I mean, mock execution, it's a crime that's under international jurisdiction. He could have been arrested on European soil for that crime solely, and there were also other witnesses that could have testified against him. That was not the case. What happened is that here in London he met with DFID, and he was given £12 million in aid to train his force in human rights abuses. No, not abuses, in human rights, sorry. And I think that, I mean, that's kind of the core of the issue. Instead of, prosecuting criminals, you throw money at the problem. And that's, I mean, of course I'm biased in this issue, but still it's a very clear example of how the real politics kind of triumphs human rights and press freedom. But then let's play the real political game then. You could argue with the UK officials and also with Swedish officials, is it from a kind of Western perspective wise to really put all your eggs in the Ethiopian basket? I mean, if you look at the region, look at the Horn of Africa, look at what's happening in Yemen, Saudi Arabia's involvement, Eritrea, and so on. Is it really wise to put all your money on that horse in the long run from your own Western interest? And I think that might lead them to listen, to kind of reshift their focus and reshift their balance in the region. Because you have a situation now where Ethiopia also has learned that they can cross every red line there is and get away with it. I mean, imagine if Russia had shot 300 civilian protesters the last 6 months. We wouldn't be talking about anything else. It would be, from morning to evening on the news. But Ethiopia can do these things and get away with it. And I think we can also ask our politicians in the long term, in the interest of our own nations, is it wise to put all the money on that horse? I don't think so. I think the development in the Horn of Africa will prove that strategy wrong, and it might go quicker than we anticipate. And about suing, I mean, I don't. And I also think it's important for me to keep kind of my integrity as a journalist, to not become obsessed with the revenge or obsessed with getting right. Or I mean, I got my freedom back. I have a responsibility to put the searchlight on that prison, to talk about those who are there. And I think suing and those kind of collective process, it's up to the people of Ogaden to collect testimonies and to bring them to courts. And I mean, use the African courts, use the Africa Union system. There is a lot that can be done within that context to work legally with cases. But that's not my role. I will interview you if you do it. That's my role. But my role is not to push it and not to become. I need to keep my profession as a journalist, and I think that's a good thing with journalists, that we are not activists, and the good thing with activists is that there are activists, and the good thing with politicians is that they are politicians. It's like different instruments in an orchestra, and we need to respect each other's trades.
These relationships are very important, because when they write, we act. When we act, they write. So I think it is very important. It is work together very well. Poets, artists, they paint when you act. or when you write, Martin. I think it is very important. Yes, Tishak.
I know you are storyteller than a strategist or an activist. But I have to ask you this question whether you answer it or not. We used to advocate for human rights and to campaign, go here and there and visit officials who we thought were concerned about human rights, democracy, freedom of conscience, and whatever. Yet it seems now that the Western democracy and the Democrats, those who pose as the symbol of the beacon of democracy, aren't Democrats. They are as despots as ours. Why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because very often the officials come out and tell us that Ethiopia is a democracy. Sometimes they say that the democracy that is going on in Ethiopia is fine by African standard. After 99.6% of the seat is taken by the one party, TPLF, influenced party, they come out to fight Amnesty International, journalists like yourself, when they tell the story that that is what it is, that is what Africa deserves. Because of that, even those people in the West came to understand now that these Democrats, those who self-grandiosing Democrats, are not really Democrats. They are despots like ours. The difference between us and those in the West, in the US and in here, are that these people are very civilized, very sophisticated in doing what they are doing. Because of that, we know what has happened in the US. People chose something else. And when we talk about that, somebody told me, let me tell you the story. That is not that relevant, but let me tell you about it. People are talking about Trump. Many people chose the lady. Some people who say that she's more Democrat were inclining to choose Clinton. But most Ethiopians think otherwise, because they already know they are ready to work with TPLF. They are their favorites. So the Western democracy is not working. We can't appeal to them. We can't tell them, because when we tell them that, they tell us that that is what we deserve. Sometimes they say it openly on a public TV. So is activism necessary? And if activism is going to exist, should we call for people like Trump and Nigel Farage? Because they are honest. They say what they mean, or if they say, that is what they mean. But our politicians are not. What do you see in that? How do you see this? Because we are in a dilemma. We can't keep quiet, but at the same time, if you shout, it is much of a very meaningless exercise, as my brother said there. They tried, but that's meaningless. This establishment is meaningless. We are in that dilemma. Somebody called me a couple of days ago, and a friend, 30 years ago, he visited my village and told me that it is damaged more than it was in 30 years ago. That is the truth of it. And the fact of me not able to go back hurts me, because it's a place where I learned. I feel the smell of it, but I can't go back. It's painful. We are talking about imprisonment. It's so painful, but we are in a very serious pain, but nobody could listen to that. So how do you see that? If it is not relevant to your profession, you can ignore it, but I have to say it out anyway.
Thank you very much, Tisale. Do you want to, can I, before I ask Martin to respond, can I welcome our MP, Ruth Cadbury, who is the Member of Parliament from Brentford and Isleworth, which is area of Hounslow. Welcome. Martin, yeah.
No, it's about my pay grade, I'd say, a question on Trump. I don't really know what to say. I mean, I believe in the power of facts and arguments, and I think that all politicians of all colors and parties can be presented with evidence and facts. And I think that though it might seem tiresome at times that there's no change in policy, no matter how many facts you bring out of atrocities in the Ogaden region, it's still. I mean, we need courage, but I think patience is also an important factor to have and to keep on bringing out those facts. But how Farage or Trump or their relationship to Ethiopia, it's beyond my area of expertise.
Thank you. Yes,
I just want to
Patricia from Amnesty International.
I just want to, thank you. To raise the point, you used the expression geopolitical diamond, and you were sacrificed, or maybe your freedom to certain extent. You're probably familiar with the case we have in the UK of Andagachu Sege, who obviously was illegally abducted. So whether he's guilty of whatever crimes he's suspected, the UK government has not called for his immediate release, which they have every right to do. So I suppose I was just going to ask for any comments that you had, or if you know anything about the case. We think he's in Kalite. His partner normally comes to our meetings, but I don't think she's here this evening. She's sent me a message saying she wasn't well. But yeah, I suspect he's in Kalite. I don't know if you know any more. No?
I think his case has been well publicized because his wife and children have been on TV, BBC. Have you seen it? On BBC, morning shows everywhere. And actually it was very strong message on one of the newspapers, daily newspaper, when they said, bring our father back. And it was very strong message. So media has picked this up, but I think government is still refusing to do anything. Although there is a consular access to it, but they are not doing as we said previously. But I think we have to continue campaigning for these things. Any other question? Yes, young man? Yes, stand up and comment, say your name as well.
Yeah, well, my name is...
And brief if you can.
Of course, very brief, yeah. I don't have much to say, but one thing I will comment, first of all, I will thank Martin for the courage of going there, and then with all his suffering, still taking the message as a journalist. I think the suffering of the people in Ethiopia, whether there are other parts, has now become, in the public domain. And it's the onus is not on the journalists or the politicians, but on the people there to take it forward. And I believe advocacy needs a lot of activity, a lot of patience, a lot of activity. And I think now we are on the right track now. We are understanding, we are starting to pull the right balances. And after all, it's a message. It's a message. If you sell, the problem in the world is just about how you package your message. There are legislation in the world, international community has legislations. There are interests also, but I think in the long run, it will depend on how the people who are suffering have got the temerity to face the reality and package their message. And part of it is, I think, what's happening now. You see now Ethiopia is in the news, and the onus is on us is to start doing what we are doing now, contact our MPs, move on forward and take the day. I don't believe, in the long run, I think Lashari is again stressing to us that it depends on the people. If the people move, the politicians, the journalists, everybody will move. I've got many journalist friends who I used to communicate through the years. The journalists cannot report unless there is something to report. So it's for us to bring our evidence to the world. I believe it's the honor from us, and we thank very much all those that have been taking part. And I think Amnesty International and the human rights have been doing a great job. But I believe, the past has now ripened and it's coming out, and we need to do more and not to lament. Lament will not take us anywhere. a little action, a little action, a little action will become a river later. Thank you very much, Martin. And Lashani and all the others.
Thank you. Do you want to come in before this? I think Sandra wants to ask another question. Sandra? Yeah.
Oh, just a very quick question to echo our colleague over there. What was the Swedish government's response to your interment, and did in any way their approach on the global stage to Ethiopia change it as a result of you being labeled a terrorist?
I mean, to be honest, it took some time before the government really got involved. The embassy and people on the ground were on the case from day one, but after 6 or 7 months in Sweden, it really became a huge movement in Sweden for our release, and for the government need to fix that. And from that on, they worked really, really hard. But it's also easy to put the blame on our government, or as in the case with the UK citizen on the UK government. I mean, we shouldn't forget that still it's Ethiopia that holds these people in prison, and it was Ethiopia that jailed 2 Swedish journalists. But of course, a lot of focus was what is the Swedish government doing or not doing. The thing is, when it comes to Ethiopia, they don't really have the leverage we might think that they have, because Ethiopia has a special history, and they've never been colonized, and there is a certain relationship with the West that comes at place at times like this. So I think the Swedish government were looking for a solution where Ethiopia could release us without losing their face, and to find kind of a diplomatic solution. And in the end, that was kind of the solution they came up with, that we were given a pardon, and we accepted guilt, and we were kicked out. So it was, in a way, you could say that Ethiopia won in the short term by.
Did it alter your government's position vis-a-vis on the global stage vis-a-vis Ethiopia?
I wouldn't say so. I'd say that the relationship between Ethiopia and Sweden now is better than it was before our arrest. Bizarrely enough, and Sweden was also a candidate for a seat as a non-permanent member of the Security Council, and Ethiopia was also a candidate. And of course, this kind of vote cooperation and was a part of it, I guess. The last year, the Swedish Prime Minister was in Ethiopia 3 times, and I mean, before that, nobody had been there since the days of Haile Selassie. So of course, it's such a real political game at that level. I mean, on the same hand, I'd say that Swedish politicians are clear when it comes to that there are jailed journalists, and they raise the names of jailed journalists in meeting with Ethiopian officials. So, but it's being a diplomat, it's also a delicate business. I mean, that's why I'm a journalist, because I like to speak truth to power. Sometimes that's difficult when you go into politics, and I have respect for the kind of balance that you need to maintain. I mean, in the end, you want them to listen to your message and to accept meetings with you. So it's. I think just the sad part is that we can see that the situation in Ethiopia is getting worse. That there are twice as many journalists jailed as it was when me and Johan were free, and that the situation is deteriorating in the wrong direction. And it comes a certain responsibility then for the politicians who has the Ethiopian politicians' ears and who has the chance to influence them by whatever leverage possible.
Thank you, Martin. I think my question is to Martin and our next speaker, as I already have introduced. And the question is that with this situation after 9/11, as somebody commented, Usman Yusuf, I think, commented, that the freedom fighters are now terrorists. Is it because of 9/11? Is the world moving toward a more concern about the security of the area than human rights? And if that is true, how can we reverse it, or we can work toward it, that we can find a diplomatic language where terrorism become the freedom fighter once again? Martin, and then I will ask Ruth Cadbury to speak as well and respond.
Yeah, of course, it's in a rhetorical way you could argue that, but there is also, I mean, a real problem with terrorism. We can't deny that. So it's not easy to just joke it off or brush it away. I mean, we have real families who have suffered, suffered from terrorist-related attacks. But that also makes the war on terror more important, than the resources relocated for that war should focus on real terrorists, not on journalists and not on political dissent. And that also makes you frustrated that Ethiopia spent, 14 months with the anti-terrorism unit investigating, me and Johan, and that they spend so much time and so much energy into journalism. But that's a danger of the rubber paragraphs in the terrorism law, that you have these kind of paragraphs on moral support. While interviewing someone who is labeled as a terrorist, does that make you the messenger of a terrorist organization? I'd say no. It's a part of doing your job as a reporter. We need to speak to all groups. Bad guys, good guys, terrorist labeled, not terrorist labeled. But we can see now also how more and more journalists are being more cautious in interviewing terrorist labeled groups. And I think we need to interview them, we need to speak to them to understand why they are fighting and what is the root cause of this conflict. So of course it's on many levels, but to sum it up, I think terrorists, they can blow up buildings and they can kill people, but it's only we that can destroy our democracy and our constitution and our laws. The terrorists can never damage that. Only we can do that. And in many countries we are doing precisely that. And there is a danger in that.
Thank you very much, Martin. Before I ask Kadri to speak, and let me say that it is very important that we, in the Western world, or the Western government at least, can look into the freedom fighters, at least how they are, and especially as you said, it is a thin line. The terrorist laws have been abused and used in the world to suppress freedom of expression, and it is being used in the Western world even today. So before I ask the final speaker to even conclude, can I ask Mustafa to say a few words? I know you have worked very hard on this meeting, so Mustafa, come and say a few words. Come here. He has worked very hard. I think we should give him a big clap as well. Mustafa.
Well, thank you so much, Mushtaq. I wasn't prepared to make a speech, and I'm not a good speaker, by the way. I always try to walk behind the scenes, so that's my job. I would like to thank Martin for accepting our invitation. That was really honorable for us, for you to come here and show us what you have suffered in Ethiopia, which is a great and horrible thing for a human being to suffer what you have suffered in Ethiopia. So on behalf of the Horn of Africa community, we would like to say we are very sorry what happened to you. We are not like Ethiopian government, and especially Somali community, Ogaden community, Oromo community, Amara community, and all the Ethiopian community were sharing the pain you were suffering inside the jail. So can I ask all the community to do a little bit congratulations on behalf of the whole Horn of African people and all the people that respect human rights. And also I would like to thank our Honorable MB, Ruth Cadbury, for accepting our invitation and coming to this meeting. And also I would like to thank the Amnesty International for continuously working with us, and that was really, especially for Trish, I would like to say thank you. And Dr. Trevor, who is not with us now, and Mushtaq, on behalf of the community, I would like to say thank you so much, and we are honored to be working beside you. So thank you so much.
I think Mustafa has done what I was going to do, but I think can I invite, and let me tell you, once our MP has spoken, Ruth Cadbury, then you can all come across here and have a group photo as well, because I know a lot of people would love to have one. Can I invite Ruth Cadbury to say a few words?
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me today. Assalamu alaikum. I'm a new MP. I was elected in May last year. Shall I stand up? And then
No, I think it will be better because these two gentlemen
I was elected in May last year, and I represent the constituency that starts at Hounslow Heath. Hounslow goes through Isleworth, Brentford and Chiswick. I've been a Hounslow councillor for many years before last May. So I know some people, and particularly Mustafa, from the Alpha Khan Mosque in Lambton, and some of the sisters there as well, in Lambton Road in Hounslow, that's the Alpha Khan Mosque. And so as a result of those friends, I was invited by the community, Ogaden community, to your community centre in Southall. And that, to be honest, is the first I knew about the Ogaden. I'm embarrassed to say that before that lovely afternoon, and thank you so much, I didn't know, I'd never heard of the Ogaden, I didn't know where it was, and I certainly didn't know of the appalling human rights violations that have been going on in your country. But it coincidentally, that very, just a week earlier, I'd had another man in my advice surgery from Ethiopia, not from Ogaden, but he was telling me about human rights violations in Ethiopia, particularly in the areas that he came from and that he knew people. And it made me realise and made me far more aware of what Ethiopia is doing, and it is getting worse, and it has been escalating in recent months and weeks. And so, I've resolved to see what I can do, and particularly I think the key bit of leverage I think we have, but I say I am not an expert on human rights or foreign policy, so I'm happy to be advised. But Ethiopia is the second biggest recipient of UK aid money.
Very true.
And if there is any leverage at all, I believe that may be something we can do something about. So, so long as I'm not stepping any toes or causing more problems, I'm happy to submit questions or whatever in Parliament. And it was good to see, and you need to keep the pressure up, and I saw some of you outside on the demo that you had outside in Parliament a couple of weeks ago. I have your book. Mustafa and colleagues gave me your book, and I will promise to read it when I get a chance, and get myself far more absorbed in what is frankly a shocking and appalling situation, and particularly what has happened to women in Ogaden, and the use of sexual violence as a weapon of oppression is just so shocking, and so just such a breach of international human rights. It is just unbearable. I don't know whether you expected me to answer the question. Freedom fighters, terrorism, terrorists. It's a use of language. Obviously, it depends who you are and what position of power you're speaking that you use the term. Not that I would want Daesh to ever get into, into power, into a proper state situation. But let's remember that people who have in the past been called terrorists have come to power, even in parts of the UK. So that there are possibilities, and one never should rule the doors. I mean, I wasn't here at the earlier discussion, so I don't know. I need to be careful because I wasn't here for the context of the discussion. But thank you very much. It's really good to welcome you to Parliament, and no doubt we'll meet again. Thank you.
A big clap to yourself who are there, and then you can come around. You can come here and people can sit and have a photograph, because I know today function is recorded and it will come on. Thank you very much for everybody. Anybody want to come behind us? All of us. Come on, quickly. I know. Come quickly. I think you can keep on sitting. Okay. Come in. You can sit, Vishale. A couple of people can sit here. Everybody can stand. Yeah. Especially ladies, most of us can we have ladies sisters? Because I know they are always shy. Don't come. Men, be careful. Don't. Colorful ladies come forward. My man, you move away. Of course, look, I'm speaking. Yeah, women move a little bit. Okay, no. We stand together. Quickly, young man. Ladies, come in, please. There's the camera. Can you do this camera, Khalid? Take the honorable members' camera and do a photo. Take this. Khalid, we take this.
Okay, the shutter is in the middle of the screen, but not the middle of the screen. It's the screen, but not the.
Look at the camera, please. Look at the camera. Everybody. Can you do it, Khalid?
Yeah.
Do a couple of them. Mustafa, you need to come in. And you can keep on speaking. I think our voice will not come into the camera. Can you check?
Did it go across?
I don't know.
Check it. And if it is not taken place, we will ask somebody else. I will ask Mustafa. Brother, can you come here? Excuse me, Hamza. Can you take this? This camera. Take this. Take this.
It's okay.
Take it. I didn't take it.
No, it isn't. Okay. Touch it right in the middle. Somewhere on the picture, but anywhere.
I think it is somewhere. Yeah.
It's a Moto X.
Can we look at the camera, please?
I could just thank all of you who were out protesting and doing things for me. You were while we were in jail also. I know many of you took to the streets and did that for me. So I'm incredibly thankful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And Mustafa, the book can be given to you.